What's up, everyone? We're back for another episode of Locked On Bucks, and we're back to discuss another loss. We are not used to this, discussing all these losses, but it's an interesting point in the Bucks season. We know that they have excuses for why they're losing, but we can't just keep going through the excuses. What are the Bucks going to do? They've started this road trip. They've got some really difficult games coming up. And quite honestly, they face a bit of a challenge here because you don't want to let it slip too far away as the regular season continues to roll on. So we're going to discuss that on today's show. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Bucks. I'm your host, Kane Pittman. You can hear me and see me on this show Monday to Friday, and also find my work over at ESPN and NBA Australia. And joining me, the founder of BrewHoop.com and longtime voice of the podcast, Frank Madden. As always, we thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen of every single day. And unfortunately, this season so far, your first listen of every single day has been discussing more losses than we're used in the regular season. The Bucks go down to the Wizards to 94. And again, Frank, I mean, look, we've discussed this. I didn't come into this game expecting that the Bucks were going to win. The Wizards were 6-3 coming into this prior to the season. They've been playing really well. Obviously, they've had a major restructure of their roster. But also, by the same token, it's not like the Wizards are a team that we expect are going to contend. And I guess that's where we're at when we look at this team right now and the mentality that we take when we're watching the team, covering the team, and maybe what the players are taking into this at the moment, because they're still lacking bodies. They've still got a number of guys out. They've got guys working into the lineup. But what did you see tonight from this game? Because it followed a familiar tale. The Bucks were competitive. They were in with a chance to win in the last minute and a half. They couldn't execute really anything offensively. We've seen this before, but ultimately it's another loss. They've now lost 5 out of 6, Frank. I mean, it's a fair old skid that they're on.
Yeah, I mean, we saw last year the team. I mean, they had generally very good injury luck, with the exception of the Drew Holiday COVID situation. And during that period, we saw them lose 5 straight games without Drew Holiday, and that sort of underscored, I think, the concerns around the depth of last year's team. And how many did they just have enough dudes to kind of make it through a full season and then obviously survive a rigorous playoffs? And obviously they did the latter quite well, winning a championship. But
that's a good way to bring everyone's mood up to start the podcast, by the way.
Yeah,
just remind them about the championship.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it just kind of feels like, you have Drew Holiday now back the last couple of games, kind of getting back from the ankle injury / illness. You have Bobby Portis now has been back the last few games, working his way back. But those guys have not been very sharp. A couple big, like, poor plays late. Drew missed not an easy layup, but a driving layup, driving kind of glasser, and then a really costly turnover down the stretch. Bobby was kind of everywhere today. Like in terms of like using possessions offensively and defensively. I mean, 4 steals, 2 blocks. Certainly made some plays. I think 13 rebounds, but 17 shots for 13 points. He has not shot the ball well since coming back, but he was at least a plus. I mean, they had a good differential when he was on the floor, and ironically, it was Giannis was the minus guy tonight. But we did see them go a little bit different with Bobby starting next to Giannis, and it basically felt like Bud was saying, "All right, I'm just going to start my 5 best players, more or less, and hope that translates into better basketball rather than sort of trying to overthink it." We saw them, starting with, and it was kind of interesting because it basically was a 3-guard lineup plus Bobby and Giannis, but with Drew, with Grayson Allen and George Hill still in the starting lineup. That was the part that surprised me, was George Hill staying in the starting 5. So yeah, I think it's an interesting, it was an interesting game, but it felt a lot like kind of other games, and that, ultimately look at the box score. Defensive rating of 102. They actually defended well enough to win this game, but the offense was, again, just stuck in mud. Giannis was not sharp, took a lot of jump shots, wasted another good Grayson Allen game. We mentioned Drew and Bobby were inefficient scoring, and the Wizards were a lot sloppier with the ball in terms of turnovers. I think they had 19 or 20 turnovers, so Bucks around 12. The Bucks end up getting, I think, 13 more shots because they also did really well on the glass. I mean, we talked about, the Knicks game was a huge issue, was just they just looked small, right? And at least in this game, the rebounding wasn't an issue. They actually did very well. I think they had a close to 90% defensive rebound rate. I think they only gave up 4 offensive rebounds, but the lack of size and or at least the lack of defensive size, practical size outside of Giannis, we saw that really throughout the second half. The Wizards just killed them on pick and rolls. Bradley Beal in particular, we saw them going up top to Daniel Gafford, and the Bucks, tried some different things, but whether they were playing center field with their bigs, whether they were trying to do a little bit of switching sort of later in the game. But for the most part, they really didn't have any real answers for that in the second half. And Bradley Beal in particular cooked them down the stretch. And I think, and you said it, they're 4-6, and I just expect them to lose every game right now. Like, I expect them to shoot poorly and lose. Is pretty much kind of my assumption going into these games. And as we've been saying, like, they're obviously missing, they're arguably their second or third best player in Chris, and I think comfortably their fourth most important player in Brook Lopez. And so those are huge losses. But at some point, like, you gotta start winning some games, and it can't just be waiting around to beat the Detroit Pistons of the world. You still have Giannis. He played 39 minutes tonight, and he played, I think, the entire fourth quarter. So, they were trying to win this game. This wasn't a cruise control game, but they were just sloppy, didn't make shots, and down the stretch in the fourth quarter didn't make enough plays. And again, you head out with this big road trip coming. You're going to be facing tougher teams than the Washington Wizards, and right now, there's just a lot of work to be done to get better, because this doesn't really look anything like the Bucks team we're used to seeing.
The 39 minutes for Giannis certainly stands out. And look, his line was excellent, as it's always going to be, particularly when a lot of the time it feels like he's the one guy out there. 29 points, 18 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals, a block. Not quite as efficient as he's been at times so far this season. Obviously missed some free throws as well. But yeah, I mean, the excuse is built in. We understand why. I actually just went through some of the numbers after this game. Wrote some stuff. I don't write about the Bucks too often, but I wrote some stuff down, and I was just looking at some lineup data, and so far, and look, we're 10 games into the season, and anyone that's watching the Bucks understands this, but when you read this out, it still makes you, I don't know, laugh or cry. I'm not sure what, but Justin Robertson and Sandro Mamukelashvili, the two-way players, have spent 44 minutes on the court together. Chris Middleton and Drew Holiday have only spent 36. The 4 best players of Giannis, Middleton, Drew, and Brook have played 6 minutes together all season long. I mean, it's catastrophic, the injury stuff that's going on. And then even tonight, Grayson Allen, you mentioned, I thought he was fantastic again. There's only so much you can get out of Grayson Allen. I mean, there's only so much he can bring to the table. He's not a Chris Middleton, but he was sick before this game. And apparently he wasn't going to play because he wasn't feeling well. And of course, then everyone obviously asked the question, okay, well, has he been around Chris Middleton? Is this a COVID situation? So there's a lot going wrong for the Bucks. And I think part of it, when you talk about the depth, if you look at the box score, Bud, I mean, it's almost like an NBA Finals Bud rotation here tonight. I mean, you had 8 guys play. Jordan Nwora only played 13, but then you had Pat Connaughton playing 28, Shemi Ojale 17, and then Robertson's minutes were well down. Thanasis' minutes were well down. So you basically played 8 guys, and a couple of those guys with Ojale and Bobby Portis are still working their way back in, and so is Drew Holiday. So it's just like, it's disastrous. But you're right, Frank. There's going to come a point here. They've got some really, really difficult games coming up on this road trip with Philadelphia, New York, Boston, Atlanta, I think is the other one before they come home. And then when they're coming home, they're playing the Lakers, who I know they haven't been playing all that well, but it's still the Lakers. So it's not, I'm not panicking about this team, but you're right. There has to come a point where you're going to get to the stage where you're like, look, I know they have all the excuses in the world, but this is like concerning. I mean, you can't just let it slide. You can't let it slide. So I don't know. I want to get to what you think they can do defensively. I mean, of course they can hit shots, but as you pointed to, well, maybe they can't hit shots, but
they need to. I think that's your point. They need to hit shots. That would be very helpful.
They need to hit shots. But even against the Knicks, they did, and it was something else. Like, I think defensively, it's going to be interesting. We spoke about the fact they've actually held up pretty well if you look at the defensive numbers, but in different games, in different ways, they've been exploited. And part of it is just the personnel that they have on the floor. Tonight, you mentioned the pick and roll. Daniel Gafford was just, I mean, he was just having a field day out there, right? Straight out of halftime. So I think, rather than talk about the same things, and yes, this team, they're missing players. We all understand it. Can they actually do anything about this? Because again, Bud's been very cryptic about Brook Lopez and whether he's coming back. But before we get to that, talk about Prize Picks, which has the best NBA DFS prop game on the market. Prize Picks offers more NBA props than any other DFS prop operator and offers all the superstar players as well as bench players, only recording a handful of minutes each game. Prize Picks offers any prop you can think of, from yardage to touchdowns, even interceptions thrown. All of your users that deposit and use your promo code will receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100. So for you guys out there, use the promo code NBA there. You can pick 2 to 5 players and an over and under on the projections, and you can win up to 10 times on any entry, and it's just you versus the projected numbers. You can don't hesitate, check out prizepicks.com and use promo code NBA, or go to your app store and download the app today. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. And Sundays, particularly when the Bucks are playing and it's crossing over with the Green Bay Packers, it's the perfect time for DirecTV stream, because you're trying to watch NFL, you're trying to watch the basketball. You might have someone else in your house that's not a sports fan. They're trying to watch some garbage reality TV. Who knows what's going on? You might be like Frank. You might be a parent, and maybe your daughter or son wants to watch a kids show. Who knows? Anyway, you can get all your TV together with DirecTV Stream. It brings your live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before, so you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all into one place. That means no more juggling remotes and no need to buy another device ever again. And the best part, there's no annual contract. So get rid of the clutter and the confusion and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directtv.com. That's directtv.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package.
By the way, I'm having huge regret that I bought the NBA package through the NBA app. So I have the just all digital league pass rather than getting it through DirecTV, which I used to do. And then last year, for the first time, I did it through the NBA app. And because I had my DirecTV stream, I was watching the Packers game on DVR, and the DVR works well on DirecTV stream. And first off, I mean, the NBA mobile app is just terrible. Like, you start a game, you can only rewind a minute or something like that. Like, you can't just start a game and move it back. I'm just like, what? And especially because I was watching a lot of MLB TV this year, which is just, kind of the gold standard of streaming apps. So anyway, enough of my complaining, but yes, I am a satisfied. Between the McDonald's apps and the DirecTV stream, I'm just really giving a lot of excellent, very honest, legitimate testimonials here of late. But yeah, it was not a great Wisconsin sports day, between the Packers just sort of falling short with Jordan Love, and we don't need to get into Aaron Rodgers because that's a whole nother podcast. But yeah, I had some frustrations watching the Bucks game today on the NBA app. It's better on Roku than on my phone, but yeah, not great.
Speaking of Aaron Rodgers, you can check out the Locked On Packers podcast with Peter Bukowski, and he'll deal with that. We're going to deal with the losing Bucks right now. Now, I mentioned before we cut to the break there about the Bucks needing to find a way to figure this out. So defensively, but they've tried different things. So tonight, obviously, the pick and roll, they were caught, and it's difficult because Giannis is playing center. He spoke about the challenge of being that guy that's kind of playing the center field, as Marcus Johnson always describes it on the broadcast. And sometimes tonight he got caught a little bit high, and then it's an easy lob over his head. Normally, he's the guy that's coming in and breaking up those lob attempts, or at least giving the fear factor that he's going to do that. We've mentioned Thanasis a number of times, the way he was blitzing pick and roll. So they've played some zone, which I know you love particularly. Maybe they need to go back to a 4-quarter zone.
I just gave a very sour looking face for those of you listening and not seeing my face on YouTube.
but the point is, Frank, they're trying lots of things. They've tried different things. You can't accuse this team of sitting on their hands at all. So are you looking at this and saying, okay, I think this is what they should be doing, this is what they can do defensively? I'm not sure, because again, a lot of the times, and I think part of this is just league-wide, the offense has been down. So I don't know actually how much credit to give the Bucks for their decent-ish defensive rating. But what are you saying? What can they do?
I think honestly, I think defensively, I mean, without Brook, and with Giannis having to pretty much be a center, tonight's a little different, right? Because Bobby was out there to start with
Mhm.
them, and they targeted Portis a fair bit in that second half, understandably, right? I mean, like if you can put either Giannis or Bobby into a pick and roll, like obviously you'd rather put Bobby into the pick and roll, but um, I don't know. I'm actually okay with a lot of the kind of tactical variation that we've seen from the Bucks. I mean, I found it interesting, less so tonight. I think tonight they probably needed to switch more. Like they probably just needed to try to switch more of those pick and rolls that ended up in Gafford lobs. And it wasn't always Bradley Beal
Yeah.
throwing those up to him. And again, it's hard because Brad Beal's really good and he can cook anybody and you can contest a shot and you can still make it. Um, but I mean, they had to deal with that times two against Chris Paul and Devin Booker in the finals. They had to deal with that with other guys, Trae Young and others, throughout the playoffs. So, yeah, I think the message they eventually switched it, with Giannis, and one of the challenges too is like when you switch Giannis and he's the center. The problem is if he's out there defending on the perimeter, then you're really small on the glass as well, and you're going to get really hit on the boards. And I think we saw that early in the season. That's one of the fundamental flaws. And again, I think it's kind of funny. I think after the bubble, there was this sort of groundswell of, hey, maybe Giannis just needs to become a full-time center. Go where the puck is moving. This is where the league is heading. You see what Bam Adebayo did. Bam's like shorter than Giannis, I think technically. But I think what we're seeing, this year has been sort of a reminder that it's hard. I mean, he's talked about it's just very taxing to be playing center, to be put in those pick and rolls, to be having to battle against the biggest guy on the floor on the glass every game. And as much as Giannis, I think, can kind of play whatever style, he sort of figures it out to some extent. I think tonight we did see some limitations of his. It's really hard to defend Bradley Beal in a pick and roll with a big man running to the rim when you're the big guy. It's just hard.
You're telling me
And
he can't make the DeAndre Ayton block on every single
every
play?
time, yeah, exactly. So I think we've seen pretty clearly, like it just is. Giannis shouldn't be playing center 90% of the time or whatever, 75% of the time, whatever. Like, I think physically it just doesn't make sense to do that. You save. I mean, you have to do that to some extent. I think it's good to practice it. But I feel like the Bucks have gotten plenty of practice in it at this point. And I think moving forward, again, it's just this question of when does Brook Lopez come back? And so I defensively, I think to come back to it, I think the variation defensively, I don't really have that big of a problem with it. I think the switching, I've been surprised. Most teams, especially game to game in the regular season, are not going to be able to punish you switching smalls onto bigger guys. And like if they had done it more tonight, like is Daniel Gafford gonna post up Drew Holiday or something like that, or George Hill? Like he might be able to do something some of the time, but I don't think teams generally want to play with their in today's age with their big guys trying to post up smaller guys like time and time again. And I think generally they've gotten away with that to a large extent. I mean, we saw them against Utah, got to get away with that. And then like we were talking before, I mean, I've been surprised, like the blitzing and some of that stuff. I mean, kind of like the closest we've seen to the Jason Kidd era since the Jason Kidd era. And I've been surprised at how much they haven't been killed by it. And I think certainly 3-point shooting kind of coming down to earth a bit this year with fans back, I think has been part of it. But you look at their shooting distribution as well. I mean, they're allowing fewer threes as a percentage of total shots this year, and as well as a lower percentage. But the problem is that they're giving up a lot more at the rim, right? So it's like the issue is for everybody who was complaining about too many 3-pointers allowed last year, well, they're quote unquote defending the 3-point line better, but it's like, are they really defending it better, or are teams just getting easier shots around the basket, right? And we're seeing that in some of the points in the paint numbers tonight. It was 50 to 44, right? Another big number from the Wizards. Even though the Wizards did not get many offensive rebounds, they didn't draw a lot of fouls either. Maybe the Bucks should have fouled more and put some of those guys at the free throw line, but yeah, I don't know that there's like a ton differently that you need to be doing. I mean, Bobby Portis is going to have to play, but like I think these last couple of games, like we've seen more of like previous year inefficient offensively Bobby Portis. And I think the big thing last year with Bobby was, I mean, people talk about his defense, but he was by far the most effective offensively that we've seen in his career, and he was making threes. And obviously, he's still trying to get to that point this year. So, yeah, I mean, I think offensively, I think a lot of it just comes down to needing to get some of, especially Drew reintegrated. I thought it was encouraging. We saw Drew and Giannis combine a couple times in the pick and roll for Giannis finishes in the fourth quarter. We saw Giannis late slip a screen for a lob finish, which is something you kind of, I mean, sometimes people say, why don't they just run that play every time or whatever, right? But it's a play that the defense can adjust to. Usually Giannis sets a real screen. So when he slips a screen, that actually is a wrinkle that, again, you don't want to always sort of throw in there. So, I think that's been one of the big differences. Like you look at Giannis's numbers, I tweeted about the other day, but I think his assist rate, his percentage of shots assisted was down in the high 20s for 2-pointers. And previously it had never been below than 42%, which just sort of shows you that Giannis is not getting easy baskets off of other people's creation. And again, it's probably because there's nobody to really create for him. So I think the big thing offensively, I mean, is some bolt of lightning inspiration? No, but I think getting more to the kind of Giannis Drew 2-man game. I think if you can get to the point where you're relying less on Giannis to just create from the top of the key, which I think has been one of the bigger problems when Giannis is on the floor is him having to really create too much of shooting for himself. He's still been overall very effective. I mean, the on-off numbers are insane. We should be clear for that right now. I mean, Giannis is I think they're plus 38 net with Giannis on the floor or something like that. I mean, it's pretty wild, how much better they are with him on the floor versus off. But, we've seen the last couple of games. I mean, there's limitations to that. It's not like they're losing these games purely when Giannis is on the bench. And tonight they were -6 with him on the floor and -1 with him on the bench in only 9 minutes. So, yeah, I mean, I think just, again, getting back to, I think, figuring out ways to get some of the other shot creators creating shots. Grayson Allen and Pat Connaughton have been very efficient as scorers this year. But I think Bobby Portis has struggled. Drew was really good when he first started. He's been kind of rough these last couple of games. So I think you're just going to need Drew Holiday to really be a number 2 scorer. I mean, I think he's probably going to need to be a guy scoring 20 a game or so over the next, couple weeks here, especially depending on when Chris comes back. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know that there's, again, any sort of easy fix. I think a lot of it's just, you can't have all these games where you shoot under 30% from 3 because they are really dependent on that because they're not killing, they can't rely on killing teams on the offensive glass quite as much. And with the way teams can defend Giannis and really zone him up when he has the ball, he can't just get to the rim and score every time. And I don't know. I wanted to ask you, I mean, we've seen some of his 3-point shooting games. We've seen a number of kind of high volume 3-point shooting games of late. I thought in that Knicks game, it was really hard to get to the rim. And I think he settled for a lot of jump shots. Tonight he was 0 for 4. He's back under 30%. So, I mean, I think we can put the whole, as Giannis found his jumping, let's just put that on ice for a while. He's been actually pretty decent from mid-range. I think his numbers via Basketball Reference are up above 40%, kind of in the mid to long range 2 department. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to make a living as a jump shooter when you're Giannis, and finding that balance is really hard, especially when there just aren't enough creators around you.
Yeah, I've never been wanting to blame Giannis for shooting these jump shots, particularly early in the season, just because he's been doing literally everything. I'm like, you know what? Yeah. You want to shoot a few
he's
jump
tired.
shots?
I mean, I think he's tired. He's just, they're kind of, some of them are kind of lazy shot. I mean, I thought the worst one tonight was the one where
mid-range.
He shot.
Yeah.
No. I was gonna say the straightaway 3 he pulled up. I think he pulled up really early in an early clock, and then what was it? Harrell just beat him down the floor. He kind of held it, and it was, I think, a 3-point play going the other way. Just stuff like that. I mean, that's what the Bucks did to the Hawks last year, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's on the one hand you don't mind him kind of exploring the space a little bit, given how little they've had around him, and I think it's natural for him to shoot a little more in terms of jump shots. But some of the cranking up 10, 11 threes in a game, that's kind of what I want to get away from. I think tonight, at least, he didn't go crazy with that, but he also wasn't great in terms of his effectiveness inside the arc.
Yeah, he was 0 for 4 from 3. And as you mentioned, he got a couple mid-range jump shots up as well. There was one interesting tactic that I saw the Bucks use tonight, which I want to bring up here. But these guys, they're going on a road trip now. they're going to be pretty tired. I feel like they probably need a good meal. They're actually going to the White House tomorrow, and I wonder what the White House is going to have in terms of food. Because I love Thanksgiving, and it's close enough to Thanksgiving that I wonder if the White House and old Joey B are going to have a White House Thanksgiving style meal for the Bucks. All the good food and treats, but maybe the Bucks want a yummy dessert that isn't so full of calories and sugar. They're pro athletes, so it's the perfect time for Built Bars. Built Bar is a new holiday dessert. Feast on something delicious and feel good about it. One slice of pie has upwards of 300 calories, and that's on the low end. Most Built Bars are only 130 calories and only 4 grams of sugar with plenty of protein. The Bucks have got a back-to-back coming up in Philadelphia, then in New York. This would be a great way to celebrate visiting the White House. So replace the coconut cream pie with coconut Built Bar, or go to raspberry Built Bar instead of that raspberry pie. Lots of good flavors to replace any pie. They're low calorie, low carb, low fat, and high protein. And they're also covered in 100% chocolate. Go to built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. So the tactic that I found interesting from this game tonight, and look, we know the Bucks are obviously undermanned and they're waiting for the bodies to go back, but I thought it was a little bit curious when they tried to get away with 6 on the floor. It's rare that you see teams go to this, and people, last year certainly would accuse Bud of not adjusting, but I thought this one was at least worth a shot. It didn't pay off. What do you think about 6 players on the floor, Frank? That could work moving forward?
I mean, they were accused of playing 4-on-5 with PJ Tucker offensively for so much of the playoffs last year. Like, wasn't it only fair that Bobby Portis was like just sort of like kind of on the floor in the backcourt? I mean, obviously he wasn't really doing anything and he's trying to get off the floor. But yeah, I mean, I had visions of, not to keep bringing it back to Aaron Rodgers, but Aaron Rodgers loves to catch the defense with an extra guy on the field, and it felt that way. Except the Bucks were the ones that inbounded it, if I recall correctly, and then hit a 3.
Yeah. By the way, of course, they hit a 3 on a play that they wipe off.
Yeah. So that's just kind of the way it went. But I mean, hey, the way the Bucks offense was going tonight, they probably kind of needed that extra body. I don't know. It was not pretty. Again, a 95.5 offensive rating. I mean, I need to double check. I remember they've had 2 games under 90 offensive ratings this year, which they hadn't had one that bad, I think, in like 2 years. So tonight again was one of those, like, I mean, that's a really bad number to put up, and unfortunately, that's been pretty regular occurrence here so far early in the season. And I mean, we were talking about before the podcast, like, when we talk about like kind of the kind of built-in excuses they have, it's like, let's put it aside. Okay. Like, are we concerned that the Bucks can't win in, April, May, and June because of what's happening right now? No. Okay. Like, we should like begin every podcast, I think, saying that. But I think the 2 things that I just worry about are the games still count, and these still count towards seeding. So if you go 1-4, God forbid, 0-5 on the rest of this road trip, you're digging yourself quite a hole. And, again, like, you don't want to normalize that, like, oh, well, when Brooke comes back, then we'll be good again, right? What if Brooke comes back? And by the way, it was good to see him that he's traveling with the team. It's not like he's laying in a bed somewhere when we don't see him every night. Like, he's traveling with the team. So again, I don't know if that's a great thing for your back, but hopefully it's a sign that his back isn't doing that badly.
I mean, he's animated on the bench, he's moving around. It's not like he can't walk, but there's just no info. Like, it's, I will say that it is annoying. Like, I wish that, and I've been in these calls and people always tweet, why can't you ask this? Well, Bud he will not budge. And I would have just at least prefer if they came out and said, look, he's going to be another month away, because like this never ending, like, no update. It's kind of bullshit. Like, at least just say he's going to be a month away. You know what I mean? Like, you don't even need any more info. If you don't want to give any more info, fine. But every 2 days, having to ask, is there an update on Brooke Lopez? No. It's like, well, come on, give us something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But I mean, here's the thing, right? I mean, like, Brooke might come back. And by the way, if I had to guess, over under on when he comes back, like maybe around Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
somewhere around that, maybe later this month. That would be my guess. But he could come back and then he could be out again, right? I mean, we don't really know much about kind of the nature of the injury. So it's sort of like, you can't sit around and just be like, oh, well, we'll be fine when Brook comes back. It's like, well, what if Brook comes back and then he's gone and out again, right? And obviously the other pieces, you're missing Chris, and obviously you cross your fingers that, his COVID situation will resolve itself quickly and he'll be asymptomatic and you won't suffer any kind of consequences longer term from this. But, we've seen other guys, seemingly everybody on the Celtics who got COVID has talked about having kind of longer term, conditioning issues related to it. And you don't know if Chris or Drew, or God forbid Giannis. I mean, again, we're kind of been spoiled in terms of the injury luck that this team has had the last few years. But, you may have to face an extended period of the season without more than one guy. And hopefully it doesn't happen. But at some point you got to just sort of like quit, saying like, well, we'll be okay we'll be fine when guys come back. It's like, well, okay, but I don't think you want to be like a 6 or 7 seed. Like you want to actually have a chance to put yourself in a decent position. And certainly the longer this draws out and the more losses they pile up, you start to look at the standings, and, Philadelphia, I think, is going to be a fascinating, matchup on Tuesday. The Sixers, Tobias Harris went on the COVID list pretty much right when Chris did. Obviously, Ben Simmons is not playing. And Joel Embiid hasn't even played that well this year. And yet they have the best offense in basketball, and they're 8-2. They have lots of excuses to be crappy. On top of just the chemistry questions, right? I mean, literally, your countryman, Kane, Ben Simmons, the Aussie, just injecting all sorts of strife into that locker room. By the way, for those listening on the podcast, Kane is not taking this bait at all. I was waiting for him to his face to react to me trying to bait him by calling Ben Simmons an Aussie, which he doesn't even have an accent. So I mean, like, how much of an Aussie can he be? But
Frank, I will say this: the other day in the YouTube comments, and I've said this before, I've come under fire for not giving Thanasis enough praise. But in the YouTube comments the other day, I had a passionate Greek fan suggest that I don't give Thanasis enough praise because he's a foreigner. So if I'm not giving Thanasis enough praise for being a foreigner, you think I'm going to give any credit to a stinking Aussie? There's no way. No way I'm giving credit to an Aussie. Never.
We have a long history of not respecting Greek basketball players on the Milwaukee Bucks. I mean, I can't think of a single Greek basketball player that I respect. Frank
cries when Giannis misses a free throw.
Yeah. I think we're okay with Greek basketball players. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just like at some point it's, and again, like we're still so early. It's like game to game. Like, if you win even one of these 2 games on Tuesday, Wednesday, that's basically like my hope. I'm just like hoping they can win one of these 2 games against the Sixers and the Knicks. I mean, if you win 2, then everybody's suddenly like way better. But you're much more likely to lose 2 than win 2, I would say, at this point, just given the way this team is playing at this stage. But at some point, you got to pick yourself up off the mat and just be like, okay, if we have like, enough guys here, we're supposed to be deeper this year. You're still missing Dante. Obviously, Chris is out. Obviously, Brook is out. But, you have Giannis, you have Drew, Grayson, and Pat Connaughton have been playing well. You have some guys. George Hill has actually, I think, played pretty well. So, I mean, at some point, go win some damn games, guys. Like, you can't just sit around waiting. And so I don't know. So it's just kind of, I think really the kind of most annoying part is just that, I think we all thought it'd be fun, and I hope it will still be fun to have a full season where you're the defending champs. It doesn't really feel like, it just feels like your whole season has just been on hold here since really, other than opening night, which was this amazing coronation. It seems like basically since game 2 on, it's just felt like the Bucks season has been on hold, and it's just felt like, other teams just getting to beat up on a half strength champs, basically, right? And it hasn't really felt like, there's really been a chance to really kind of appreciate what this team did last year as they've been continuing to look like that team, that contender this year, right? It's basically been just opening night, and since then, obviously just a lot of kind of stubbing toes and kind of middling efforts and things like that. So yeah, it's not a lot of fun. Not a lot of fun watching this basketball team right now. Is really, I think that's a fair statement to say. Doesn't mean you have to panic about it, but they're just not very fun to watch right now. And again, at some point, you're gonna kind of run out of excuses, and obviously, hopefully, that comes when the guys get healthy. But we don't know. We don't know when that's going to be.
Yeah, it's difficult now to think about the situation, but I do think if you had asked any Bucks fan last year, look, you're going to win the title next year. Sorry, you're going to win the title this season, but next year you're going to be injury riddled and you're going to be a play-in team. I'm pretty sure most people would have taken the title, but when you're in it and you're watching it nightly, like you said, you want to win games and not even necessarily win games, but just like see fun basketball. And at the moment, it's just difficult for them. As we said, the excuse is built in. It's not a lie. I mean, you take this amount of players off any team, they're going to be pretty average. Like that's the way it works. But hopefully they can bounce back a little bit here. As we wrap it up, remind you the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast with Josh Lead. Make sure you check that out if you're playing fantasy basketball. It's the number one fantasy YouTube show podcast in the world. That's a fact. So go check it out. He's doing massive numbers on YouTube as well, making us very jealous over here on Locked On Bucks. So you should subscribe to us if you're listening.
By the way, can you put in a good word with Josh? Like, I mean, we keep plugging him. He doesn't need our help. Like, how about him plug us? We need some help over here. We're just a team podcast. We're not the whole fantasy basketball podcast. Our guy Josh has to help us out here. But you guys are Aussies. Can your buddy help us out a little bit? I don't know. I don't know if the Bucks are that interesting from a fantasy standpoint right now, given all the random dudes that we've got playing games game to game.
Not unless you drafted Grayson Allen, who is getting up 8.5 threes a game at 40% and really consistently scoring. But no, I think Josh is pretty protective of his spot as the number one Aussie in the network. So I don't think he's looking to.
By the way, this is 2 straight games. The Bucks and shout out to Grayson Allen. Like, yeah, I don't even want to like do a Zoom meeting if I'm feeling ill. He's playing. I don't know how sick he was, but I mean, he was obviously on the injury report. Like, guys playing NBA basketball at a high level while being sick, like always just sort of like respect to those guys. But that man wasting that Friday night game against the Knicks, wasting the Sunday night effort from Grayson Allen, like, come on, Bucks, like give the guy some help, man. He's doing everything he can.
No, he's been awesome. Grayson Allen has been fantastic to start the season. As I was looking at the schedule, my final point said obviously it's going to get rough here with this road trip. We assume it's going to get rough. I mean, just because they're playing good teams. Maybe they surprise us.
And they're not playing well.
Yeah, they're not playing well. Maybe they surprise us and win 2 out of these 4. That would be absolutely awesome. Well, I think we would all take that. But they need to find a way to get to around Christmas time, around the new year, and just be hovering around 500. And I know that that's not where the standards that the Bucks would like to have or the fans, but I think that is where they need to be. Through January and February up to the All-Star break, 16 of the 26 games are at home. A lot of those games are against teams that we expect that the Bucks would beat pretty comfortably on a nightly basis. So they're just, I mean, it's a hell of a long season. We're 10 games in out of 82. They're just going to hang in here for the next few weeks, hopefully get some of those bodies back and start to get on a bit of a roll here. But yeah, it's not the ideal start. Hopefully they can start to pick up some wins soon. But tomorrow at least will be a fun day. Giannis said he's got a speech prepared. He said he's very nervous. Maybe they were thinking about the White House tonight. I don't know. Let's give them another excuse. They were worried about the trip to the White House tomorrow. So that's going to be fun for those guys. We'll wrap it all up on tomorrow's show. Anything funny that happens, anything noteworthy that happens, we'll discuss it. And then we'll look ahead to the Sixers and Knicks as well. A big doubleheader. So a busy week. And
here, just for some perspective, Kane, sorry, but we mentioned, the 5 losses in a row last year. So people, I don't know if I had to jog my memory here, but the last 2 of those 5 losses came. Remember that home and home against the Raptors, who of course eventually had the wheels come off their season entirely. Raptors beat the Bucks in Milwaukee, 124-113, and then 110-96 in consecutive games. Dropped the Bucks to 16-13. So after 29 games, they were 16-13, and then they ended up winning the next 5 games, and actually they won 13 of 14 after that. So they went from 16-13 to 29-14. I could go for a 13 out of 14 string here, Kane. I'm going to go ahead and say it's probably going to get worse before it gets better. But yeah, I think that's kind of like, as you're alluding to, you don't have to be gangbusters from the start of a season, but it would be good to start playing some better basketball, and hopefully things kind of start to turn your way a little bit.
Yeah, no doubt. We've just turned into November. The playoffs start in late April. So, we got a bit of time here, but you don't want to get too far behind. So we'll leave it there. Bucks go down to the Wizards. Philadelphia up next for Frank and myself. We'll catch you guys tomorrow.